I find this gameplay harder to follow and less satisfying to follow than, for example, this gameplay. But I bet a lot of people feel the opposite way and think this second one is harder to follow. Now, you may play one or both of these games, it's Warframe and Arknights, and of course it's easier to evaluate them side by side if you play neither or both of them instead of just one of the two. But in this video, I invite you to look at each and focus on what exactly you're seeing, what information is being conveyed, what would be important to know. Again, here I'm just going to explain why I prefer what I prefer, just my opinion at the moment. If you feel differently, I'm not saying your experience is wrong, we probably feel differently about similar details, and that's part of the fun. Warframe has, by virtue of being an over-the-shoulder, third-ish person action game, a more familiar format to a lot of people. And while I think it's more interesting to put aside our own experiences with each game as much as possible, I still think that's a part of Warframe more objectively. You know, I think more players would find it easier to get their bearings here because they've seen more gameplay from this perspective before. I think the most unclear, relevant thing about Warframe's gameplay is how it obscures victory conditions. It's difficult to see if enemies are dying and how close the objective is to being completed or failing, unless you look at the minimap and perhaps the small indicator for the objective or its health bar, if it has one. Whereas in Arknights, you can kind of just look at the defense objective. If enemies are far away from it, it's probably pretty much okay. And yes, that's kind of an are you winning son kind of way to talk about it. But my point is that Arknights privileges that information. It's literally larger on the screen. It also doesn't hurt that Arknights also has less variance in its objectives. Like just about every mission is all on one screen, visible all at once. And you basically always just need to stop enemies from leaking through that defense objective. So in fairness, Warframe has a larger variety of objectives, a way larger variety, and they're also easier, I'd argue. That's pretty hard to demonstrate anyway other than it's true for me. You might not feel that way for everyone, but you know, death and failure are less prominent in Warframe's design. You can revive more quickly and a bunch of times. You can retry most things as much as you want. Without getting too sidetracked, the reason I think that matters is that I think it's maybe fair to say it's less important to know how the mission is going in Warframe. Those details are smaller on the screen, but they also matter less, you could argue. Oh, and you also have more time to check, because in Warframe the missions are usually longer. Even the longest Arknights mission would be maybe 3 or 4 minutes, barring some very rare exceptions. I guess they're more similar than I thought, but it's certainly common to play a Warframe mission for much longer than that. Flipping the difficulty discussion around a bit, saying that you're basically winning if enemies aren't near the defense objective in Arknights is very hand-wavy, and I think getting more accurate reveals a problem. Arknights usually doesn't telegraph an approaching loss very well, in the sense that many enemies have hidden abilities or map mechanics will rather suddenly change the tide of a fight. Some enemies have special attacks or leave something behind when they die, things like that. Like in this case, when exactly this enemy is gonna actually walk to the objective isn't entirely clear. It shows their path right when they spawn, but it was quick at the beginning of the match, just like what you saw. Warframe may not give you a bird's eye view of the whole battlefield, well, except when you bullet jump high into the air. And you may have trouble seeing through those particle effects. You can't slow down time or pause in the middle like you can in Arknights, but people die when they are killed in Warframe, generally, and your objective will usually not die at all instantly. You can see it taking damage or going badly or something, and then go stop it. You might not notice because the indicator for that is small, but you certainly have time to react if you do notice. Ultimately, the reason I prefer Arknights' viewing experience is that I feel like I can see when what I've done was effective. The view from above and being able to slow down and stop, and how the game slows down when you drop any unit or click an ability, those matter a lot to me, and from my perspective that's also part of making a deliberate build. You know, I want to be able to see when it's doing the thing. So a certain sort of team in Arknights, when I've set up a squad to complete a mission, I really want to see when they're being effective, what's working and what isn't, exactly how things are going wrong if they go wrong. A problem we have in Warframe, especially during build breweries that are about like a build setup in Warframe, a problem we often have during streams like that is that it's difficult to see that a build is doing something, or even further, it's difficult for your build decision to make or break your success in missions in Warframe in general. Of course, that's partly due to Warframe being largely designed for multiple players at once, too. I tried to get a good amount of footage for this video that was not multiplayer. You know, I had the mission on public, but there just weren't people there. Warframe is more of a spectacle, you could well argue, and it's very immediate and freeing. The movement of Warframe, obviously, is a very different feeling. The camera is moving around. A lot of people really like that. They're very different games. I've chosen them that way on purpose. But one thing I've learned from Warframe is that I don't much care about spectacle in the long run. Or to me, it's not firing a big explosion that I find satisfying, but more this sensation of the whole battlefield going all at once, seeing my defenses set up in various places, working to hold the line, assassinating enemies on the sides. It's when my tactics go well that I feel badass in Arknights, and that doesn't look like much a lot of the time. Like, that was it. I just cleared sort of the big threat in this mission. But for me, it was really satisfying, and I can very clearly see that my actions led to success. That's what I really care about seeing when I play these games. Much like thinking about what kinds of builds you like to make, I think this way of looking at a game's presentation and thinking about whether it prioritizes what you as a player care about more is really useful. Do this kind of thing enough, and you can pinpoint games that will satisfy your tastes in much more specific and meaningful ways than just, this is a looter shooter, this is a tower defense game, a gachapon game. In my mind, none of that is useful. It doesn't mean much. What matters to me is not what these games are, but how they are about those things. How did you like this video? I've been Zandy, and I'm gonna close my eyes for a few minutes over here. I trust your judgment. You choose where we're off to next.